New York has legislated that recreational adult use cannabis will be available for sale in New York. But in order to sell cannabis, New York first needs to grow it. The regulatory roadmap for adult use marijuana production and distribution is still being hashed out. But New York has already approved a select number of conditional cultivator licenses. This week, David Lombardo checked in with Allan Gandelman, president of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, to see where New York's budding cannabis industry stands.
So thanks so much for joining us from your farm office, Allan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you already wear a lot of different hats. You're the president of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. You've got your own farm in upstate New York, but your resume is growing as you will now be serving on the state's Cannabis Advisory Board. What's that board's mandate and what are your hopes for it moving forward?
So the mandate of that board is really twofold as I understand it right now. First thing is to look at all of the draft regulations that are starting to come out of the state in regards to cultivation, processing, dispensaries, et cetera, around the cannabis industries and make comments. And the second mandate, which I think is the bigger mandate and it's going to be years of work, is deciding how to reinvest the tax money back into the communities around New York State that were most harmed by the war on drugs. And so there's 13 members of us on that board. And if I remember correctly, 40% of the tax revenue gets diverted into this kind of community reinvestment program that our 13 members kind of decide what to do with.
So while a lot of the rules and regulations are being crafted right now, it sounds like you're going to have work to do into 2023 and beyond as revenue really begins to pick up, most likely from the sale of marijuana.
Yeah, exactly. For this year, we only just had our first meeting, which was really just an intro meeting. And after that, hopefully we'll be meeting at least monthly or more. And probably the tax revenue won't come in until mid next year, I would guess. And that's where kind of the next phase of what we're doing as a board would set into play.
So you're one of about 220 hemp farmers in New York who've been granted conditional licenses to grow marijuana this summer so that when and if dispensaries open later this year, they have something to actually stock their shelves with. How is the growing season going so far for you?
For me personally, the growing season is amazing. It's been a dry summer, but a really nice summer for growing cannabis. Our plants look fantastic, and we're going to have a really good, high-quality crop this year.
And I mentioned that more than 200 farmers have been greenlit to grow marijuana in New York, but we're a state of 19 million people. So when you think about the demand from adults that might pop up once dispensaries are up and running, will we have enough crop to actually stock shelves for more than a week?
We'll have enough crop to stock shelves for more than a week. It might only be 3 to 6 months, though. It depends on how many dispensaries the state opens up. Even with all these 220 farmers, if you look at what the state consumes in cannabis, it's probably millions of pounds a year. And each farm can only grow up to 1 acre. So it's really a good start, but it's not going to satisfy the entire industry. It's maybe going to satisfy 10% of the need. And so there's a lot of room left for more licenses across the industry. And that's where the state has to continue rolling out regulations and rolling out licenses. But ultimately, it's going to come down to how many dispensaries are there. This new $200 million fund is available to start funding these justice-involved dispensaries. And so we're going to see how that rollout looks like over the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, you mentioned the justice component of the dispensaries, which we'll be seeing come into action later this year. But there's also a social equity component to the growing of marijuana in New York. Can you talk a little bit about the mentorship program that's supposed to accompany the conditional licenses that were awarded to those 200 plus farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the bill that the governor signed earlier this year creates a mentorship program for people who want to get into the industry, who are most likely going to be social equity cultivators, so that they can pair up with an existing farmer or network of farmers and really learn how to deal with a regulated industry. So there are a lot of legacy cultivators in New York State that have been growing for years. And so through the mentorship program, they don't need help learning how to grow cannabis. They know how to do that. But I think the things we could help with are around the paperwork, compliance, the seed to sale tracking system, labor practices, making sure you have employees on the books, all of the other things that are, hard to do when you're dealing with a highly regulated industry.
And finally, the state's Cannabis Control Board recently approved final regulations that will govern the dispensaries that are supposed to open this fall. And there's been a lot of attention paid to the fact that the initial applicants will need to have experience running a business and either have a marijuana conviction themselves or be related to someone who has a marijuana conviction. Anything else meaningful about these regulations that people should know, especially if they're interested in applying for a license to run a dispensary?
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned the biggest parts that no state in the country has done, and that is, finding people that have some business experience and have been convicted or arrested of a cannabis offense, and not just themselves, but anyone in their immediate family. Really trying to find the people that have been, their families have been affected by the war on drugs, not just themselves. So that's unique. Going above and beyond that, what's unique here that people should know is that there is a $200 million fund that New York State has to help people not only get their licenses, but actually find real estate locations, find those dispensaries, sign leases, and help them get into a storefront by the end of this year. A lot of times what you see in other marketplaces is, it's hard to find real estate. Landlords don't want to rent the dispensaries, or if they do, they're like charging exorbitant amounts for rent. And in this case, New York State is really going to kind of step in and help to alleviate the risk so that people don't have to go out there and try to raise millions of dollars, float long-term leases, wait for the licensing to come in, et cetera. So, this is a really fast-tracked way to get people into a business and up and running as soon as possible. And so I think that's just something really unique, and people have to kind of understand the state's role in this. It isn't just you get a license and you're off on your own. It's like, you get a license, and then here's a potential storefront for you to operate as your first one. And then in the future, if it's going well, you could open up, other storefronts down the line.
Well, we've been speaking with Allan Gandelman. He's the president of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association and a member of the state's Cannabis Advisory Board. Allan, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.